Welcome to Mr. Kelin Stories. If you're ready to dive into thrilling tales full of suspense, passion, and heart-stopping twists, you're in the right place. In today's story, secrets unravel, love blooms in the most unexpected places, and every moment keeps you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss a second. So, grab a seat, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell, because this journey is just getting started. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and share if you enjoyed the story. Your support means the world. Let's make this community grow. Stay tuned, stay excited, and as always, enjoy the adventure right here. In the sprawling cityscape of New York, where ambition thrived amidst the towering skyscrapers, Olivia Blackwell stood at the pinnacle of her career. A corporate strategist, known for her sharp mind and even sharper instincts, she had never imagined herself being bound by anything as fragile as love. In fact, she had always prided herself on being independent, unshackled by the weight of traditional expectations. She built her empire through intellect and hard work, never relying on anyone, especially not a man, to define her worth. Then, without warning, her world shifted. It was an evening that started like any other. Olivia had been at a high-profile gala, discussing strategies with potential clients, when a message from her father arrived. The Blackwell name had long been a force to be reckoned with in New York's business world, but recent setbacks had caused cracks in their empire. Olivia's father, desperate to stabilize the family's financial position, had brokered a deal that required her immediate attention. The deal wasn't just any contract, it was the cornerstone of the Blackwell family's future. But there was a catch. To solidify it, Olivia had to marry Alexander Knight, the CEO of the tech conglomerate Knight Industries. Knight Industries, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, was at the heart of the deal. The marriage would unite two of the city's most powerful families, ensuring that the Blackwell empire would not only survive, but thrive. Olivia was furious, of course. She had never entertained the idea of marrying for anything other than love, something she felt was a rare and elusive concept. However, when her father laid out the consequences of refusing, she had no choice but to comply. The future of the Blackwell family depended on it. With a heavy heart and a mind clouded with frustration, she agreed. The day of the wedding arrived under the intense glare of New York's paparazzi. It was a spectacle, a show of wealth and power. Olivia stood at the altar, the elegant white gown hugging her silhouette, but her heart wasn't in it. The vows she spoke were hollow, mere words that fell flat against the grandiose backdrop of the ceremony. Her gaze never met Alexander's, instead focused on the heavy weight of the contract that now bound them together. Alexander Knight, on the other hand, stood stoic and composed. As the head of Knight Industries, he was no stranger to making hard decisions. In fact, he was a man who lived by logic, not emotion. His reputation in the corporate world was built on a foundation of control and precision. There was no room for romance or affection in his life. To him, this marriage was a business arrangement, a necessary step to fortify his company's future. From the outside, they were the perfect power couple, a union of business empires. But the reality was far from it. Olivia's resistance to the arrangement was palpable, and Alexander, a man used to getting what he wanted, understood the power of silence and distance. There was no expectation of love, no desire to break through the walls Olivia had so carefully constructed around herself. She remained cold, her eyes often focused on the documents and strategies she worked on, not on the man she was now married to. The first few weeks of their marriage were spent in silence. Their interactions were formal, polite, but distant. Olivia had her own corner of their lavish penthouse, a space filled with her books, her work, her life. Alexander, for all his wealth and power, spent his evenings in the study, his mind consumed by numbers and reports. Their worlds were parallel, never meeting, each respecting the other's need for space, but never crossing the threshold of intimacy. Their agreement was clear. The marriage was a formality, a business contract that would last 2 years. No emotions were involved, no personal connections. It was an arrangement that suited them both. Olivia could continue her work, and Alexander could focus on expanding his empire. They were like ships passing in the night, coexisting without ever truly touching. But in the heart of New York, where power and passion often went hand in hand, it was only a matter of time before something would have to give. Both Olivia and Alexander had a deep reservoir of emotions they had long buried. Ambition, desire, frustration, but neither was willing to admit it. Not yet. The tension was there, barely perceptible, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Olivia felt it in the quiet moments when she would catch Alexander's gaze from across the room, brief, fleeting, but always there. Alexander, too, couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was a pull, something magnetic between them, but neither had the courage to confront it. In their world, relationships were often transactions, and love was an inconvenience. But there, in the quiet undercurrent of their marriage, was a promise of something more. Something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Not yet. Over the course of the 2 years, life in the sprawling penthouse high above downtown Manhattan became a complex dance of professional success and personal distance. From the outside, Alexander Knight and Olivia Blackwell were the epitome of power and grace, two names that reverberated through the halls of boardrooms, high society, and the media. Alexander's tech empire had expanded exponentially under his leadership, and his name was now synonymous with innovation and success. Olivia, too, had solidified her place in the corporate world, becoming one of the most sought-after strategists in the city, known for her sharp mind and unyielding confidence. Despite their professional triumphs, their marriage was an enigma to those who observed from the outside. The grand events, the shared public appearances, and the whispered conversations in the business world painted a picture of a perfectly orchestrated union. But those who looked closer saw the cracks, subtle but unmistakable. The cold, towering walls of their penthouse seemed to mirror the coldness of their relationship. The space between them, both physical and emotional, was palpable. They had built a life together based on mutual respect, but no passion ever found a place in their marriage. They shared the same roof, but their worlds felt worlds apart. Every night after the cameras and reporters had left, after the lavish dinners and soirees, the silence between them grew louder. Alexander would retreat to his study, lost in spreadsheets and meetings, while Olivia retreated to her own space, surrounded by work, books, and plans. It was as if the marriage itself was a business transaction, and their physical presence was the only thing holding it together. Olivia, ever the strategist, had built walls around her emotions, deliberately keeping Alexander at arm's length. For her, the marriage was never about love or connection. It was a shield, a way to protect herself from the pressure that constantly weighed down on her. Being thrust into the public eye had been an overwhelming adjustment, and she had long ago learned to keep control over every aspect of her life. Her virginity, something so personal, had become a part of that control. She had made a conscious choice to remain untouched, not out of naivety, but because it was the one thing in her life she could dictate. She wasn't about to let anyone, not even her husband, have power over her body or her decisions. Her mind often wandered to the future, wondering if there was more to life than what she had now. Her marriage with Alexander was functional, yes, but it lacked warmth, passion, and connection, the things she had always imagined when she thought about relationships. She had resigned herself to the fact that this marriage was a business decision, and that was all it would ever be. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the constant pull she felt when Alexander was near. It was a magnetic tension, a silent understanding that neither of them had the courage to address. She had to keep her guard up. She couldn't let herself get swept away by the man who stood next to her, a man who was so different from the stoic businessman he presented to the world. Alexander, on the other hand, felt trapped in a different way. He had built his empire with a single-minded focus, pouring his energy into growing Knight Industries and securing his place as a titan in the business world. But as the years passed, something inside him began to shift. There was an undeniable attraction to Olivia, something that went beyond her beauty and intellect. He admired her strength, her unwavering determination, and the way she navigated the complex world of corporate strategy. Yet despite all of this, he found himself frustrated by the distance between them, the emotional barrier that she had so carefully constructed. In the quiet moments, when they would cross paths in the penthouse, Alexander couldn't help but notice the way her eyes never lingered on him, how she always seemed to pull away when he got too close. He longed to break through the walls she had put up, but he didn't know how. He had always prided himself on control, on being the one who dictated every aspect of his life. But Olivia, with her quiet strength and unwavering independence, was a puzzle he couldn't solve. He knew she was different. He could sense it in the way she moved, in the way she carried herself, in the way she didn't flinch when their paths crossed. But no matter how much he admired her, no matter how deeply his attraction to her grew, there was always a wall between them, and it was a wall that Olivia had built high, brick by brick, keeping him out of the one place he most wanted to be, her heart. Alexander found himself growing restless. The nights seemed to stretch on endlessly, the silence between them growing louder. His longing for her, both physically and emotionally, intensified with each passing day. The power he wielded in the boardroom felt insignificant compared to the yearning he felt whenever she was near. He began to wonder if there would ever be a way to breach the distance between them, to show her that he wasn't just the cold businessman she had married. He wasn't just a stranger in her life. He wanted to be more than that, and Olivia, for all her resolve, couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, Alexander was more than the man she had initially thought him to be. But to let herself fall, to give in to the attraction that lingered between them, was terrifying. It meant surrendering control, something she had always guarded fiercely. So, for now, they continued on their separate paths, side by side in their marriage, but oceans apart in their hearts. And yet, despite the silence and the distance, there was an undeniable tension between them, a spark that neither of them could extinguish no matter how hard they tried. Time was running out, and soon they would have to face what had been left unsaid. And maybe, just maybe, that was where everything would change. As the days counted down to the second anniversary of their marriage, the tension between Olivia and Alexander had reached a boiling point. Their professional lives had flourished, and they had become a fixture in New York's high society, the powerful couple everyone admired, but few truly understood. Yet, behind the glittering facade of their union, there was an unspoken weight. The emotions they both carried, heavier than any contract or deal, had been buried under years of distance and silence. But as the night of their second anniversary approached, everything felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and neither of them could escape the underlying tension that had been simmering for so long. For Alexander, the realization came like a sudden flash of clarity. As the CEO of Knight Industries, he was used to making decisions quickly and decisively. But when it came to his marriage, he had remained passive, accepting the terms of their arrangement without question. However, as the anniversary drew closer, he found himself reflecting on everything that had unfolded over the last 2 years. The admiration he had for Olivia, her intelligence, her strength, and her unwavering resolve had turned into something more. The distance between them no longer seemed acceptable to him. Alexander had always prided himself on being in control, of having every aspect of his life carefully orchestrated. Yet, as he sat alone in his office late one evening, he realized something fundamental. He wanted more than just a business partner, more than just an agreement between two powerful families. He wanted his wife, his partner, his equal in every sense of the word. The realization hit him hard. All the walls he had built up around his emotions, the walls he had used to keep control over every part of his life, were no longer enough to protect him from what he felt. He wanted Olivia, not just as a figurehead on his arm at gala events or a silent partner in their shared success. He wanted her as a woman, as a lover, and as someone who would stand beside him fully in both the business world and the private world they had never fully shared. As he sat by the window, overlooking the bright lights of the city, his mind raced with thoughts of how to bridge the gap between them. He knew Olivia wasn't the type to fall easily into any romantic narrative. She had built walls to protect herself, and those walls had been reinforced over the years. But Alexander wasn't about to let this marriage slip into the abyss of mere formality. He had to act. He had to take the risk. Meanwhile, Olivia, too, was at a crossroads. In the quiet moments, when she allowed herself to think beyond the corporate chessboard, she began to realize something she hadn't before. She had been so focused on the marriage as a business agreement, so adamant about protecting herself and her independence, that she had neglected to see the man standing beside her. Alexander had been different from the men she had known. He wasn't like the other businessmen she had worked with, ruthless, arrogant, and self-serving. He had shown her a respect she hadn't expected, giving her space and time to be who she was. He had never forced her into anything, never pushed her boundaries, and in doing so, he had earned her trust in a way no one else had. She found herself looking at him differently now, the walls she had carefully built beginning to crack. She had never allowed herself to think about him outside of their business arrangement, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was something more, something real. She could see it in the quiet moments when their eyes met, in the rare instances when their hands brushed, in the way he listened to her without judgment or pretense. Olivia had always prided herself on being in control of her life, but in that moment she realized that there was one thing she had never truly been in control of: the way Alexander made her feel. It was terrifying to admit it, but she could feel the pull toward him, the attraction that neither of them had acknowledged until now. It was more than physical. It was an emotional connection that had been there all along, hidden beneath the surface. The night of their anniversary, Alexander finally made his move. He had spent the day reflecting on what he wanted, what he needed, and now he was determined to take the first step. As they stood together in their penthouse, the city lights casting a soft glow over the room, he turned to her, his voice low but firm. "Olivia," he began, his heart pounding in his chest. "We've spent 2 years together. 2 years in this arrangement, this contract, and I've respected it. But now I want something more. I don't just want a business partner. I want you. I want you as my wife, in every way possible. Not just in name, not just in public, but fully and completely. I want to be with you, not just for the next 2 years, but for as long as you'll have me." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, everything around them seemed to disappear. The towering buildings outside, the wealth they had accumulated, the expectations they had both carried. It was just the two of them, standing in the heart of their world, finally confronting the truth they had both been avoiding. She felt her heart race, her mind spinning. She had never allowed herself to entertain the thought that she could truly surrender to another person, to let go of the control she had held so tightly to. But in Alexander's eyes, she saw something that made her heart stir. He wasn't just offering her a place in his life, he was offering her his heart, his vulnerability, his trust. The walls she had built around herself began to crumble, piece by piece. And in that moment, Olivia realized that maybe, just maybe, she had been waiting for this all along. She took a step closer to him, her voice barely a whisper. "I never thought I could let anyone in. I've always been afraid of losing control. But with you, I don't feel like I have to." Without another word, Alexander closed the distance between them, his lips capturing hers, in a kiss that was years in the making. It was soft, tentative at first, but quickly grew more passionate, more urgent. There were no more barriers, no more distance, just the two of them, finally giving in to the connection that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. That night, everything changed. It wasn't just a physical union, it was the beginning of something new, something deeper. For the first time, they weren't just husband and wife in name. They were partners, equals, and lovers. And as they lay together in the quiet aftermath, they both knew that their relationship would never be the same again. It was no longer about business. It was about them, fully, completely, and without reservation. The turning point had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. That night, as the city lights shimmered through the expansive windows of their penthouse, the space that had once felt like a cold, impersonal fortress of power and success began to transform. The sleek, modern decor, which had always been a reminder of their business arrangement, now felt different. The room seemed warmer, softer, as if the walls themselves were shedding their armor, opening up to the possibility of something deeper, something more intimate. The weight of the past 2 years hung between them, but for the first time, Olivia and Alexander stood on the precipice of a new chapter, one that was no longer defined by duty or expectation. The agreement they had lived by, no intimacy, no emotional connection, had been shattered. What began as a calculated corporate union was now morphing into something that neither of them had anticipated. A genuine connection, founded on trust, respect, and something far more profound. Olivia's heart raced as Alexander's words echoed in her mind. "I want you. I want all of you." She had spent so much time guarding herself, keeping the world at bay, convinced that her independence was all she needed. She had always been a woman in control, her emotions, her desires, her very identity. But in the presence of Alexander's quiet intensity, those walls began to crumble. For the first time, Olivia allowed herself to step beyond the boundaries she had so carefully constructed. She opened herself up to him, not just physically, but emotionally. It was terrifying. She had never been vulnerable in this way, never allowed anyone to see her fears, her insecurities, her true self. But there was something in Alexander's eyes, a softness, an understanding that made her feel safe, even when the fear threatened to overwhelm her. She trusted him in a way she had never trusted anyone before. Alexander, for his part, had always known that there was more to their marriage than the public face they presented to the world. But that night, as they stood face to face, he realized just how much he had underestimated the depths of his own feelings for her. His attraction to Olivia had always been there, undeniable, but it was the emotional connection that had slowly grown between them that made him realize he wanted so much more than just a physical relationship. He had been patient, waiting for the right moment, respecting the space Olivia had needed. But tonight, he wasn't waiting anymore. He wanted to prove to her that his feelings for her weren't just a product of convenience or business. They were real, raw, honest, and full of a depth he hadn't expected. Their first kiss, soft at first, lingered in the air, building with a slow intensity. It was more than just a physical act. It was a promise, a silent declaration of everything they hadn't said, everything they hadn't allowed themselves to feel. As the kiss deepened, the boundaries between them dissolved completely. The marriage of convenience was gone, replaced by something far more beautiful, something that had been waiting to surface for years. In the soft glow of the penthouse, they spent the night exploring each other in ways they had never imagined. They weren't just discovering each other physically, they were discovering a new layer of connection that neither had realized existed. Their conversation flowed as naturally as their touch. They laughed about the absurdity of their initial arrangement, the awkward moments that had defined the early days of their marriage, and the absurdity of how long it had taken for them to truly see each other. For Olivia, the experience was liberating. She had spent so many years controlling every aspect of her life, holding herself at arm's length from everyone, even Alexander. But now, with him, she was free. She let herself be vulnerable, unguarded, shedding the layers of self-reliance that had once been her armor. In Alexander's embrace, she didn't have to be the unshakable businesswoman anymore. She could just be herself, the woman who had longed for connection but had never known how to let it in. And for Alexander, the night was a revelation. He had always known that he was capable of love and devotion, but he had never expected it to manifest like this. The way Olivia opened up to him, the way she trusted him so completely, was something he hadn't anticipated. It was more than he had hoped for. It was more than just a physical connection. It was an emotional bond that ran deeper than any of the corporate deals he had brokered, deeper than any number on a spreadsheet. This was real. As the hours passed, they found themselves intertwined, not just in body, but in soul. The passion between them was undeniable, but it was the quiet moments, when their gazes locked, when their words became whispers of understanding, that truly defined the night. They were no longer two people playing roles in a marriage of convenience. They were two individuals, bound by something much stronger, a love that had been building beneath the surface, slowly but surely, and now it could no longer be ignored. The night felt like a turning point, a moment of no return. There was no going back to the way things were. The barriers had fallen away, and the truth had been laid bare before them both. For Olivia, it was a moment of surrender, not just to Alexander, but to herself. She had let go of the need for control, the need for independence at all costs, and in doing so, she had found something infinitely more powerful, a deep, unshakable connection with the man she had once seen as nothing more than a business partner. For Alexander, the night was a confirmation of everything he had come to realize. His feelings for Olivia went beyond business, beyond strategy, beyond the corporate world they had both inhabited. He saw her now, truly saw her, for the strong, intelligent and beautiful woman she was, and in her he found his equal, his partner and his lover. As dawn broke, casting a soft light across the room, the world outside their penthouse seemed distant. Inside, there was only the quiet hum of new beginnings. They had crossed a threshold, and they both knew that their marriage, once based on convenience, had now become something real, something they both could never have imagined, but both had longed for in their own way. That night had changed everything, and as they lay together, their bodies still entwined, they knew that their journey, both as business partners and as lovers, had only just begun. The following morning, the sun peeked over the horizon, casting its golden rays over New York City's towering skyline. From their penthouse, the world outside looked the same, yet for Olivia and Alexander, everything had changed. The bustling city below, filled with ambition and promises, felt different to them both. It wasn't just the buildings or the streets that seemed altered, it was the way they viewed it, and more importantly, the way they viewed each other. Marriage had always been a carefully constructed partnership, a union that served a very specific purpose, one born of business, family alliances, and cold strategy. But now, as they stood side by side, staring out at the sprawling metropolis, they could no longer see it through the same lens. The walls that had once separated them, both physically and emotionally, had crumbled, leaving space for something entirely new to grow. Their relationship, once a marriage of convenience, had transformed into something far more profound. It was a bond of mutual respect, trust, and love, three things they had never fully allowed themselves to explore until now. Olivia felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known in years. The tension she had carried with her for so long had dissipated, replaced by a calm certainty that her life, her choices, and her relationship with Alexander were finally in her hands. For so long, she had kept control over everything, her career, her public image, even her own emotions. She had built walls so high that no one, not even Alexander, could get close enough to see the real her. But last night, something had shifted. She had given herself fully to him, not just in body but in spirit. She had trusted him with everything, her vulnerability, her fears, and her deepest desires. And in return, he had shown her a side of himself she had never known. He wasn't just the CEO, the man who ran an empire. He was her equal, her partner, in every sense of the word. Alexander, too, felt the shift. The transformation in their relationship wasn't just about breaking down physical barriers, it was about breaking down emotional ones. For so long, he had seen Olivia as this powerful, independent woman who didn't need anyone, especially not him. She had always been untouchable, her own person, fiercely protective of her space and her autonomy. But last night, he had seen a side of her that was raw and real, a side that needed him just as much as he needed her. It was a revelation that filled him with both pride and humility. She had trusted him, given him a part of herself that she had guarded fiercely, and in doing so, she had shown him the strength of their connection. Together, they stood on the precipice of something new, a chapter of their lives that would no longer be dictated by the roles they had once played. They weren't just a power couple or business partners anymore. They were a team, two people who had found something deeper than professional ambition or family obligation. They had discovered love, something unexpected, yet undeniably real. Their journey together would no longer be about maintaining an image or fulfilling an agreement. It would be about building a life together, one that was shaped by shared experiences, intimacy, and the kind of connection that only comes from vulnerability and trust. They had unlocked something neither of them had anticipated, an emotional depth that had been hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to surface. As they stood together, their fingers intertwined, there was an unspoken understanding between them. The city outside might still be the same, filled with its noise and ambition, but their place in it had changed. No longer confined by the walls of their marriage contract, they now faced the world as equals, partners, not just in business, but in life. They had crossed a threshold, one that neither of them could have imagined when they first signed their marriage contract 2 years ago. And yet, here they were, two people who had found love in the most unexpected of places. Looking out over the sprawling city, Olivia and Alexander knew that the road ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, of course, both professionally and personally. The demands of their careers would continue to pull them in different directions, and the expectations of their families and the public would always be present. But for the first time, they were ready to face it together. They knew they could rely on each other, not just as business partners, but as a couple, as a team. The love that had bloomed between them wasn't a fleeting passion, born of a moment's desire. It was something solid, built on years of mutual respect and understanding, now sealed by their shared vulnerability. They weren't just a couple anymore. They were a partnership in every sense of the word, one that would be able to withstand whatever came their way. As they turned from the window, their eyes met, and there was a quiet understanding between them. They had come so far, and the future, uncertain as it was theirs to shape. Their journey was just beginning, and this time it wasn't defined by a contract. It was defined by love, equality, and a shared vision of what their life together could be. For Olivia and Alexander, the future was no longer a corporate strategy. It was a story of love, power, and equality, written by two people who had finally learned to trust each other.